Good afternoon. I'm Joyce Herco, Chief Operating Officer, and I'm happy and thrilled to announce two of our presenters today. We have Fred Glass, who's president of Gleaners Food Bank, and Kate Howe, who's executive director of Indy Hunger Network. So let me introduce Fred first because he'll be our first speaker. I'll introduce Kate, and then I'm going to sit down and you all take over, okay? So Fred is originally from Indianapolis. He's an attorney by education and practiced at two distinguished firms here in the city. He also was vice president and athletic director at IU. So you may recognize his name or his face when Fred stands up here. One of the things I wanted to share, which I felt was very powerful, Fred wrote a book about his a memoir, and it's called Making Your Own Luck: From a Skid Row Bar to Rebuilding Indiana University Athletics. And in his memoir, he talks about his dad, and his dad owned a bar, and his dad and his mom also fed the hungry at the bar. And that included Fred when he was a young man and his family who spent holiday dinners at the bar with patrons who had no other place to go. So Fred comes from a family where feeding and taking care of our neighbors was really important, and seems like a really, his current role is a wonderful fit for him today. Also, I should mention that Fred is a graduate of Indiana University Bloomington, and his law degree is from the McKinney School here in Indianapolis. Kate joined the Indy Hunger Network in 2016. She has a BA in biology and an MS in ecology, and also a PhD. So let's see, let me say that again. She has a BA in biology, an MS in ecology, and then a PhD in biology. She has spent a lot of time at the Indiana Hunger Network. She became interested in food security through serving as a volunteer and a board member at the Mid-North Food Pantry. And after seeing the challenges of poverty and food insecurity up close, she became passionate about working to improve hunger relief and a system of change and for people who need food assistance. So I'm going to stop because it's most important that you hear from the two of them, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So Fred, I think you're up first. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I get nervous behind the podium, so I'm going to stroll out here and move around a little bit. If you don't mind, it sounds like this is working, so, and hopefully this will be working too. There we go. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'll just say at the beginning that if you're gluttons for punishment and you want some of these slides there to be made available, so don't worry about feverishly taking notes on all these fascinating things I'm going to share with you. We are living in an era of unprecedented need, and sometimes people are surprised by that because they knew that was going on during the pandemic. And I always think of the pandemic was like a hurricane. You know, it's on CNN and there's drones showing people around, and you're watching it come, and everybody knows about it. And that was food insecurity during the pandemic, with the commensurate support that we got financially and otherwise. Now I think we're more in a flood. It's slower and it's less noteworthy, but it's equally as devastating. And so the number of folks that we're serving, the neighbors that we're serving, is way above the levels that it was during the pandemic. And people always ask me, well, why is that? What's driving that? I suppose there's probably a lot of answers to that, but the unfortunate news is the drivers of food insecurity, I think, are not things that are going away soon. We're not. This isn't a spike to be weathered, and we're going to return to some normal in my view. And I think that's important for us as pantry leaders and food bank leaders to understand that. What are those things? Rents are killing people. And I'm sorry, you guys know these things, so I don't mean to act like this is some revelation. But rents are killing people up and down the economic spectrum. And Indianapolis, unfortunately, is like ground zero for that phenomenon. Rents are rising higher, more quickly than any other metropolitan area in the nation. 28% increases after bumping along at 4 or 5%. And we all probably have stories in our own families and our own workplaces that people are having trouble keeping up with rents. Recent studies indicated that a quarter of the people that rent are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. More than half of those folks are paying more than 50% of their income on rent. And I think that's driving a lot of the need. Newsflash, groceries are expensive. They went up 30% in 2019 for whatever reason. They haven't gone back down. Studies show that people on the lower end of the economic spectrum pay about 30% of their income just to buy groceries. Comparatively low wages, a lot of people will say, well, what's the big deal? I see help wanted signs all the time. I see that there's full employment, blah, 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 blah. The fact of the matter is, first of all, the people we serve are working. So it's a canard that people are sitting back waiting for their free box of food and watching Gunsmoke and TV quiz shows and stuff. About a quarter of the people can't work. They're kids, or they're disabled, or they're elderly. But of the balance, there's at least one job in those households. But unfortunately, the wages we pay people don't keep up with the cost of living. So the Brookings Institute has declared $18 an hour plus health benefits is a living wage, which that's about $37,000 a year. So we're not talking about a princely sum, but a third of the people in Indiana don't make that much money working. And if you go to what they think will be the new livable wage at $21 an hour, half the people in the state of Indiana don't make that much money. And then finally, declining government support. During the pandemic, there was a lot of government support, and that's declined. And I'm going to try to do this a little more quickly so that I don't eat into other time. That impacts us at Gleaners. We are providing more food than we ever had before, and that has a variety of consequences to us, not the least of which is we're spending a lot more money buying food. So a lot of people wouldn't have a reason to know that we get our food from 3 different places. The government gives it to us, our people donate it to us, like major food manufacturers or retailers, or we buy it. And because government support has gone way down and demand has gone way up, donations are still doing pretty well. We are now purchasing, instead of about a third of what we need, we're purchasing about half of what we need. And a lot of people don't realize, they think it's kind of like your grandma's food pantry, green beans in, green beans out, macaroni and cheese in, macaroni and cheese out. It's actually a very complex logistical operation. And before the pandemic, we spent about $2 million a year buying food. This year, our budget was 7.7. We'll spend about $8.5 million buying food. So what does food insecurity mean? We talk about that a lot. The USDA has a definition, but I think it really means more than that. And relevant to today's conversation, has a lot to do, and it has a lot of implications for health, right? So it's a leading cause of illness in the U.S. 500,000 deaths per year are attributed to food insecurity. This one kills me, and a lot of you guys probably know this. I didn't know this. I checked it like 4 times. The USDA says most children alive today will be obese by the time they're 35. That's crazy, and it's nutrition driven. I know you're familiar with this statistic. A lot of people aren't. It's something that I think is important to share. Your zip code's more important than your genetic code, right? If you're born in this township, your life expectancy is much less than if you're born in Fishers. A lot of that is nutrition driven. So who are the hungry? This is an important take away from me, hunger is not a them problem. Hunger is an us problem. There are people in your kids' soccer league and your PTA, probably in this room, people that work here who are facing food insecurity to one extent or another. Again, these are folks who are working. They're not, laggards. They're trying to make it. Again, the statistics about if they can work, they are working. Not all folks can work. And I like to emphasize that because these are folks who are trying to make it. Not that people that maybe aren't working aren't deserving, but these are people that are really trying to make it work. And we are primarily a food wholesaler to pantries. We do run one pantry, and the Thursday night and Saturday distributions are by far the largest because that's when people who work can come to our pantry. Again, on the working side, if they're working, why do they need to be in the food pantry? Well, in Indiana, these are the statistics I was telling you about in terms of pay. And in every county except Marion County, people make less than the national average. If you live in Indiana, you make about 83 cents per hour for every $1 an hour somebody makes living in another state. It does cut, again, it could be any one of us. It cuts across a variety of lines. You're more likely to be hungry if you live in a rural area, which sometimes surprises people. If you're a kid, if you're elderly, if you're a military family, this one gets me, right? We're asking people to serve our country, yet if you serve in the military, you are more likely to be food insecure than someone who's not in the military. Veterans, people of color, you're more likely to face food insecurity if you're a person of color, yet most people who face food insecurity are white, right? Just because of the numbers. So it definitely cuts across traditional lines. People who are LGBTQ plus are more likely to be food insecure, and people with disabilities are more likely to be food insecure. So there's all these statistics, and 1 in 7 households are food insecure, and the numbers are going way up. But statistics can be really overwhelming, and I think it's always important to remember that behind every one of those numbers, there's a family with a story. And one of the things I really like about my job is every other month I spend a day going out and visiting pantries so I can see the people that are doing the job. There's a saying in my world, if you've seen one pantry, you've seen one pantry, because they're all so very different. And then you see these stories. I was in Johnson County, and they have a drive-through pantry like our drive-through pantry. And there was a minivan with the hood up, and a mom and a dad, and the dad was flustered, and the mom was yelling at the dad, and the kids were humiliated. And I was asking the pantry manager, what's going on over there? And they go, he ran out of gas. He ran out of gas waiting in the pantry line. She said, it happens all the time. And it's easy for us to not know just the daily grind it is to be poor. Yet here are people waiting in a pantry line, running out of gas. I was in Martinsville, and the pantry manager was telling me the story about a woman that came in, and it kind of kills me. Like sometimes we'll have a visit, and they'll go, "Hey, Fred, there's some pretty nice cars in your line. Are they kind of getting over on you? And I'm like, you don't know their stories, And this one, I was in Martinsville, and they talked about a woman who came in, very nice car, very nicely dressed. She had a manila folder with 2 months of her utility bills, her driver's license, her social security card, all this stuff. And she sheepishly walked in, and the pantry guy goes, well, what's wrong? And she goes, well, very upset. I've never been here before. I never thought I would be here before. My husband was a doc. He left me. I have 4 children. He lost his job. There's no money. I'm in the pantry line. It can happen to anybody. The line is really thin. So this is important, especially sometimes when we talk to policymakers, because hunger is not only an us problem, because any one of us can be hungry or one step removed from somebody who's hungry, but people being hungry impacts people who aren't, okay? So food insecurity adds $1.8 billion to healthcare costs just in Indiana, according to Feeding America, okay? And you know who pays that, you know, the rest of us. Studies showed just 1% increase in the food insecurity rate increases the criminal violent crime rate by 12%. When people are hungry, they do crazy stuff. They do what they feel like it takes. Food insecurity, just on an economic basis, impacts productivity and economic activity, right? If you're hungry, you may not go to work, or if you go to work, there's this new concept I hadn't heard before called, you've heard of absenteeism, presenteeism. You know, they're there, but they're not really there because they're hungry. And studies have quantified the cost of that in the multiple millions of dollars. Also affects school. If you're hungry, it's hard to achieve in school, right? And studies show what is somewhat obvious. The children that are hungry are more likely to miss school. They're less likely to graduate. And food insecurity is a big deal on our college campuses. And if you're hungry, you're 40% less likely to graduate. So it also has an impact on school funding formula. If you're in a school corporation, the kids aren't showing up, you lose money. So that stinks mostly for the kids that don't have those opportunities, but it stinks for society too, right? Because we're being denied productive or more productive members of society. So hunger transcends adverse impacts on the hungry. It impacts all of us. So that was really encouraging, right? I mean, you know, we're sitting here eating Bazbos and hearing all this awful stuff, and it's not fun to share. But one of the reasons I like my job too is I'm very optimistic about what seems like an insoluble problem, but I think there's things we can do and are doing to mitigate and actually reverse some of this. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing. I think I'm pretty on schedule here. So who are you guys? Well, we're the largest food bank in Indiana. Gleaners is the largest food bank in Indiana. We have 21 counties, Indianapolis, the donut counties, and basically east to Ohio. We do run the single largest food pantry in the state. Remarkably to me, our food pantry serves 15% of the people that we serve in the entire 21 counties, including 300 food pantries in those 21 counties. 281, I rounded up. We work with school-based pantries. We have mobile pantries where we'll go on an ad hoc or regular basis in to do direct service. We are going to open in January the Tom and Julie Wood Family Resource Center. Very excited about that. We were talking before, Gennesaret Free Clinic is going to be our anchor tenant, providing completely free medical services, including medications. We're going to have a dentist chair there. Obviously, that's an important piece for folks. Other wraparound services, I'll talk about that a little bit more later. We've got a product, I guess, called Gleaners to Go, where we're leaning the technology. Think curbside pickup like you do at Target or Kroger or Total Wine, maybe, you know, if you ever do that. And we work through partners like Goodwill and charter schools and Glick Properties and others, so that people have the dignity to choose what they want and can pick it up in a place that is convenient for them. We also actually, as part of the Feeding America Network, we provide food to food banks around the country, just like we provide them to food pantries in our service area, which is a huge benefit to us because it generates more volume of nutritious variety of foods that we in turn provide to other people. We provide the full gamut of foods, right? Produce, protein, milk, eggs, healthy dry goods. It's a great, if you haven't volunteered there, please come and volunteer. We literally couldn't run our operation without volunteers. If we didn't have them, we'd have to add 28 people to our staff, and we couldn't afford that. We have 125 employees. We have a 300,000 square foot warehouse. We're just opening up a 44,000 square foot freezer, which is a really big freezer. It'll be the biggest one in the Feeding America network. Our annual budget's about $22 million, plus the value of the food would put us more like 200 million. And we were one of the first food banks to have a nutrition policy. And under that policy, 81% of the food we distribute is what we consider nutritious. That's what we are. Who we are is really important. I'm not going to go through all this other than to highlight our new purpose starts united with others, comma. And I hope that's a good segue with Kate's presentation, because fighting food insecurity is a team sport. It's like loving children. There can't be too many people fighting hunger. And we understand at Gleaners that we have a role to play, but it's part of being a teammate with other folks. What business are we in? I'm new to food banking. I'm closing in on my second anniversary. So as a new guy, I tried to ask questions like fundamentally, who are we? And this might sound weird from a food banker, but food insecurity is not about food. There's plenty of food. A dirty little secret is food manufacturers throw millions of pounds in the landfill in the ordinary course of business. That's no big deal. That's Tuesday. And then they throw more away on Thursday. Okay? Food insecurity is about being poor. People don't have food because they're, to one extent or another, in a poverty situation. And if they're having trouble getting food, they're having trouble staying in their house. They're having trouble keeping their lights on, you know, and they're having trouble with food and transportation and the prescription drugs. Okay? So one of the things that was, I think, a breakthrough for us is, yes, feeding people is really important. And it's one of the most fundamental things we're called to do, right? Feed the hungry. But it's also a fungible, charitable aid. And I would suggest to you that it's the most accessible and flexible charitable aid there is. Because if you get in one of our pantry lines, if you go to Crooked Creek Food Pantry, Kathy Honkinder is going to make sure you get a box of great, nutritious food. And if you can get your food for free, maybe you have some money to pay your rent or keep the lights on. And we are increasingly trying to focus on that. I'm going to tell you a quick story that highlights that. We have a drive-through pantry at Gleaners. And my pantry manager, assistant manager, Joey Inskeep, came in and said, hey, we have this couple that rides their bikes into the drive-through pantry. And they're older and they've, you know, got their bikes, and we fill up like Target bags, which is much stuff as we can, and they waddle off into the night. We say a little prayer, hoping they can make it wherever they're going. And they would come every week. And then they started saying, hey, Joey, one of these days we're going to show up in a truck. And he's like, yeah. You know, you hear a lot of stuff in the pantry line. Truck, no car, or, you know, bikes, no truck, bikes, no truck, bikes, no truck. And so I kind of give it away. That's the truck that they showed up in one day. That's it. And they said, Joe, are you proud of us? And he goes, what's going on? And they said, we took the money that we would have spent on food, literally put it in a jar until we had enough money to buy this truck. And now we're not going to be coming around here anymore because I've got a job, because I've got transportation. And that was over a year ago, and they haven't been back. Well, if I was in the charitable food business, I might be irked by that, right? Because it's like, you had the money to buy the food and you chose not to. But I'm not in the charitable food business. I'm in the poverty alleviation business armed with food. Food is the way I try to fight poverty, because that's what's driving people to be food insecure. And that's our North Star. And that's opened up, it sounds like bumper sticker philosophy maybe or something, but we talk about this all the time. This is what we're trying to do, and it's led us into a bunch of things that somebody that's in the charitable food business probably shouldn't be doing, but somebody who's in the poverty alleviation business ought to be doing. Quick example, I don't know how many of you read the story about Indy Fresh market on the east side that Goodwill and Cook are working on, and we're having some trouble because it's hard to get food supply in a food desert grocery store because of volume. Well, we worked with our insurers, and now we Gleaners are providing food to that grocery store because they are touching people who would otherwise be food insecure in a food desert. If I was in the charitable food business, I should probably be fired for that because those people are buying their food. They're not getting it for free. But I'm not. I'm in the poverty alleviation business, so we feel like that's extremely consistent with our mission. At Gleaners, our superpower is acquiring nutritious food on a massive scale. And there's a lot of people playing a lot of different roles. This is our role, and this is when we're in meetings, and it's like, should we do this? Should we do that? If it doesn't enhance that or leverage that, we ain't doing it, okay? That's why we have a 44,000 square foot freezer. That's why we have a 50,000 square foot cooler. That's why we have 25 truck fleet. I'm winding up because I feel the hook coming. I'm getting there. Shortening the line starts with serving it, okay? We talk about feeding the line and shortening the line. Feeding the people in need, but then doing things to try to make it so they don't need to be in our line anymore. And I make no apologies for feeding the line. I can't say, hey, I know you're in line because of some root cause, and that's really important. So I'm going to focus on root causes. And when I get those figured out, then I'll come feed you. I can't do that. So we with pride, we work hard on feeding the line, but we also want to shorten the line. And we do that through wraparound services like the ones we provide in the resource center. We do it through advocacy. So this is important. All the members of the Indy Hunger Network, Second Helpings, Midwest Food Bank, Meals on Wheels, Gleaners, we're all awesome. And I just told you how great we are. For every meal we provide to people in need, the federal government provides 9 through school lunches and SNAP and all that. So if we can move the dial a little bit on advocacy, we can feed a lot more people, even if I would quadruple the efficiency of what we do. And then at our best, we shorten the line by feeding the line. Joey's Friends, the bicycle truck story. And we're doing a lot of things to utilize food as a way to have people have economic stability and really economic mobility because they can count on that and free up money that they would be able to spend on other things. So that's that. You guys were very attentive. I think I was close to my 20 minutes, if not a couple minutes over. And I know we're going to do Q&A at the end, so I'll hand it off to Kate and look forward to hearing questions or comments later. Thank you.
Give me a moment here to switch this over. Okay, well, thank you, Fred. That was an excellent introduction to why we need a network of hunger relief organizations working together. So you heard about all the great work that Gleaners is doing to feed our community. And there are lots of other organizations doing that, some of whom are here, some of whom are not listed on this slide. But Indy Hunger Network started in 2009 in response to the Great Recession. So all of these organizations were working hard, doing great work to feed people in our community. But all of a sudden, when the economic situation turned really bad really quickly, all these organizations were seeing a lot more people at their front door asking for help at the same time that the economy was in the toilet and donations were declining. So less money, more people needing help, and they realized they couldn't do it alone. So actually, Cindy Hubert, before she worked at Gleaners, was the CEO of Second Helpings, and she went to Mayor Ballard and said, what can you do to help with this problem? We can't solve it alone. So he called together the first meeting of the Indy Hunger Network in his office. And many of the nonprofits, not all of the nonprofits here, were at that first meeting. So Gleaners, Midwest Food Bank, Meals on Wheels, Second Helpings, St. Vincent de Paul, Socoa. I believe those are the original members. And Connect to Help 211, which sadly no longer exists, was also a founding member of Indy Hunger Network. And in the early years, it was just a group of partners meeting to talk and say, what are the problems we're collectively facing and what can we do to solve them. Some of the early collaborations, I'm told, before my time, were I have a truckload of bananas and they're going to go bad before I can give them away. Who wants some bananas? It was simple collaboration like that. But before this group met for the first time, these organizations were not working together, didn't know each other. I've heard some of them didn't like each other, saw each other as competitors. And so having the mayor say, we need to be working on this problem together was really impactful in bringing these folks to the table. Since that time, we've added 3 additional nonprofits, the Society of St. Andrew. If you don't know them, they do gleaning from farm fields and farmers markets to try to get excess produce into the hands of food pantries and eventually people who need the food. Grace Care Center is the largest food pantry in Hamilton County. And then Patachu Foundation, you may be familiar with here in Indianapolis, that does a lot of school feeding programs. We also have corporate partners. Corteva and Elanco have been longtime partners in this work from the corporate side, and then government agencies, the Family and Social Services Administration, and the City of Indianapolis Office of Public Health and Safety are deeply involved as well. And our mission is to address systemic hunger issues and eliminate disparities in the hunger relief system, some of which Fred talked about in his presentation, through collaboration on programs, advocacy, and research. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those in a second. We are an odd hunger relief organization in that we don't actually do hunger relief. We're not feeding people for the most part, just a little bit with a few of our programs. So what are we doing in this space? As I mentioned, we were created to foster collaboration and communication. That was the first thing. And for many, actually the first maybe 4 or 5 years, that was all Indy Hunger Network did, was bring people to the table to talk about how they could work together. We do a lot of work to raise awareness of hunger and what the solutions are to hunger. Fred does a lot of that too, we all do, but we also try to amplify those messages both locally and nationally. We lead programs that fill gaps in the hunger relief system, and I want to explain that a little bit. We don't do programs that duplicate the work that our partners are doing. We look for places where there's a need, but it doesn't quite fall under the mission of our partners, and then we create a program to address that issue, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those in a sec. We do a lot of work to support the hunger relief partners, so we come to their events, we amplify their messages through our social media. We, in the past, have even given grants to our partner organizations. In the early days, one of the first things Indy Hunger Network did was give grants to some of the smaller nonprofits to help them develop fundraising capacity when they didn't have that. Fred talked about advocacy. That is a really critical component of our work, and I'll show you some numbers at the end about the importance of federal nutrition programs. We have a full-time director of advocacy, and I spend quite a bit of my time as well on advocacy work, trying to change public policy to better feed people in our community. And then we do some research too. So that's a place that maybe some of you would like to get involved, and I'll talk about that at the end. Here are some numbers for you scientists. The last line here is hot off the presses, just as of last week. So as Fred mentioned, things are getting worse. In 2020 and 2021, we had a great government response to the pandemic and the increased need we were seeing, and we were able to meet that need with the help of the government. Those programs expired. And in 2022, you can see both nationally and in Indiana, we had a significant increase in food insecurity, and last year was even worse. So we're continuing to get worse every year. The economy is not getting better. And in addition to rents being high, we have one of the highest eviction rates in the country. And once you get evicted, it's really hard to find housing again. You're seeing a lot more people on the street, and that's why. So, and in Marion County, this is, so the data in the first 2 columns are from the USDA. They put out a household food security report every year. On the right, that's from the pulse surveys from the US Census Bureau. So it says up to because those are weekly measures. People are reporting on a weekly basis their food insecurity. And so food insecurity was as high as 31% in 2023, but it varied week to week throughout the year. Don't spend too much time trying to navigate this diagram. I show this just to show how complicated the hunger relief system is. So you can see on the left are people, different age groups of people needing food assistance, the different programs that are available to them, the agencies and organizations that provide them, and then the funders. The top lighter boxes are federally funded programs, lower are privately or charitably funded programs, although there is some intermingling. And you can see that if you're somebody looking for food assistance, this is a really complicated system to navigate. And if one of these programs goes away, if Gleaners Food Bank, God forbid, were to shut down, that's going to leave a big hole that's going to need to be filled by other organizations. Or if there's a cut in SNAP benefits, these charitable organizations are trying to pick up this slack, and it doesn't work well. So that's another plug for the importance of good public policy. So to help people navigate that complicated system, this is one of the programs that we created that we call a gap filling program. Community Compass is a website, communitycompass.app, and it's also a free smartphone app that people can download for their phones. And it helps people anywhere in the state of Indiana find access to food assistance. So you can search for food pantries, free meal sites, where can I use my SNAP and WIC benefits, how can I sign up for those programs. You can screen yourself for SNAP and WIC, find out if you're qualified, and if you're qualified, how much you can get in those benefits. So, and then lots of other features I won't go into, but I encourage everybody to download this or go to the website and take a look. It's really a great resource for people to find, how do I find Gleaners? How do I find Crooked Creek? How do I find food that's available to me today? You can filter by what's open right now, what's within a mile of my home, what's on the bus line, so that you can find food anywhere that you are. Another one of our programs is Cooking Matters. This might be of interest to some of you. We found that a lot of people using food assistance really have no knowledge of what is healthy food. They don't, there's this problem with nutrition, but if you don't know what is nutritious to eat, you can't make those choices. And then even if people go to the food pantry, they get a box of fresh produce. If they don't know how to cook that or what it tastes like, how to prepare it, they're not going to use it. It's going to go in the garbage. And so what we do is we teach these cooking classes at the places where people are getting the food assistance. So actually the picture on the right is the Gleaners Food Pantry. Picture on the left is Harrison Hill Elementary School in Lawrence Township. We teach at churches, at community centers, domestic violence shelters. We've taught at 72 different locations around Marion County. Some places like Coburn Place, we teach everyone that lives there, and then we don't come back for a couple of years because we need to wait till new folks move in before we can offer the program again. But it's a 6-week class where people learn how to prepare a meal together. They take home those groceries to prepare the same meal for their family, and they're learning about healthy eating while they're in the class. Food Drop is a program that was designed to deal with the waste that Fred was mentioning. So we were hearing from food banks that truck drivers would show up and say, I've been driving around for 2 days trying to find a place to deliver this food. It was rejected from the Walmart distribution center because it was a duplicate, or it arrived on the wrong day, or the one of the things I heard was romaine lettuce with twisted stems. It didn't look nice, and so they couldn't sell it. And so those loads of food get rejected, and the truck driver often wants to donate it but doesn't know where to go. A Google search doesn't always lead you to anything fruitful, and they end up taking those loads to the dump. And so we created this system where a driver can call us and get directed to a food bank or other donation site that can accept a large load. Small church food pantry can't accept a full semi-load of food. And so we help them find the places that can take what they're offering. And actually, this is an outdated slide. Just this summer, we started a new texting service that was created by a Purdue computer science professor for us. So instead of calling us and having us sort of do the matchmaking for you, you can, if you have a load that you want to donate somewhere, you can text, tell us what you have, where you are, why it was rejected, and then you get referred to. There's a complicated algorithm I can't describe for you that takes into account where you are and which food bank did not get another load recently. So if you're in, let's say you're near Muncie, but Muncie just got a load last week, you might get directed to Fort Wayne instead. So we're trying to spread the love, spread the loads around the state, and also make sure that we're rescuing good food and not having it dumped in the landfill. We have just passed this program off to the Society of St. Andrew because they do gleaning. That's what they do full time, but we're still working with them on making sure it's successful. So we also do a lot of work with food pantries, and I'll show you a map in a minute, but Fred mentioned how many food pantries are in the area. And most of these food pantries are really well-meaning volunteers that don't know anything about running a nonprofit, about food safety, not necessarily even about the people that they're serving. And so we try to help educate them, support them, fund them to do a better job of being that, if Fred is the warehouse, if Gleaners is the warehouse, the food pantry is like the grocery store. So they're the people actually interacting with folks that need the food, and often they're just people with big hearts and not a lot of knowledge about how to do that well. So we have an annual conference called the Pantry Summit, where food pantries come for a day of learning and connecting to their peers. And we try to encourage them to think about things like writing a grant proposal or improving food safety practices, offering more healthy foods in the pantry, things like that. And then we have township groups that meet on a quarterly basis throughout the year in different parts of the city where food pantries can go, food pantry staff or volunteers can go visit another pantry and learn about how they do things and have an opportunity to interact throughout the year. We also have a manual of best practices that we wrote in 2020. We're updating it right now, but it's sort of a how-to for food pantry staff and volunteers. Here are the ways that you can do your work better. Here are the things that you should think about as you're doing your work to try to give them some of that training and knowledge that they might not have. We have a small grants program that is open right now. If you know of a food pantry that would be interested, these are grants of up to $10,000 to support things like expanding their space, buying refrigerators so they can give away fresh food, buying computers to speed up the intake process, things like that. And then related to that, we have a program called Healthy Nudges, where rather than giving people the money to go buy things for their pantry, we're actually working side by side with them, giving them technical assistance and purchasing equipment for them to help them improve the ability to source, store, distribute, and promote healthy food in the food pantry so that people that come to the pantries aren't just getting those boxes of mac and cheese, which they may enjoy, but they might also be getting some healthier items as well. So we have, at latest count, it changes all the time, 217 food pantries in Marion County. And this is why we feel that we play an important role in coordinating them, educating them, supporting them in the work that they're doing. And I will say a lot of those work through Gleaners to get food, but many of them don't. Some of them don't even know they can get food from Gleaners Food Bank or Midwest Food Bank. And so we try to bring them along. Like, you don't have to go to Aldi to supply your food pantry. You can work with a partner to get food in the door. And so we work with all of them. We work with folks that are Gleaners pantries, that are Midwest pantries, that are both, that are neither. And then in the metro area, this is the, Marion County and all the surrounding counties. There are more than 367 food pantries. And it's really a huge network of tiny little organizations trying to do something to address the problem. This is our latest program, the Food Resource Services Hub. We launched this program in February at our new office, which is 32nd and Meridian Street. Fred graciously housed us for many years at Gleaners Food Bank, and we finally grew up and got our own place. And we're doing this new program where folks can come into our office and get help with applying for SNAP benefits, with filling out an application for Sunbucks, which is the summer EBT program for school kids. Learn about WIC and find out if you're eligible. We can help you make an appointment. We can refer you to a food pantry or meal site through Community Compass. So it's really an all service, anything related to food we can help you with. And then we refer people if they have a question about housing, healthcare, something that we don't do, then we have sort of a system for referring people from there. And this is really that, we've got all these programs available, but if you don't know where they are, then you aren't going to use them and you're not going to get your needs met. So lastly, I'm going to share some data. I already mentioned this, up to 31% of Marion County residents needed food assistance in 2023. I should back up and say that Indy Hunger Network does a hunger study in Marion County every other year. And so this is from our 2023 study. In 2023, statewide, 716 million meals were provided by SNAP, by WIC, by food banks, by all the different feeding programs. And yet, with all of that food assistance, 92% of people that we surveyed said that they had low or very low food security. So they're getting lots of help. There are lots of resources available, and people still aren't getting everything that they need. And that's not, as Fred was saying, it's not because there's not enough food. It's because people can't access the programs. They don't know where the programs are. They don't qualify for the programs. The places are open when they're at work. We have an access problem, not a food supply problem. In nutrition, things are pretty grim. So only 6% of the people we spoke to that were experiencing food insecurity said that they always eat nutritious meals. That means that 94% are not always eating nutritious meals, and 25% reported that they rarely or never eat a nutritious meal. So they might be eating something, but it's not what they would consider a healthy meal. So, this is really, when you're food insecure, nutrition is the first thing to go, and then it leads to chronic disease and all the things that you all know about very well. One thing I always like to talk about is winter being the hardest time for people who are food insecure. So we think about summer because kids are out of school and then parents are trying to provide meals, and you always hear about summer being a time of high need. Well, what we hear from people every time we've done this study since 2014 is that winter is actually the hardest time because of seasonal employment. So people working in construction or landscaping often don't have a paycheck, or at least don't have as much of a paycheck in the winter. And so they're trying to stretch those dollars further. They've also got heating bills that they wouldn't have had the rest of the year that are really, really burdensome, adding a big cost to a budget that's already strapped. And then, as you know, transportation in the wintertime is also a challenge. So we have been talking for a long time about how could we possibly increase the food supply in the winter. I don't have a solution to that one yet, but that's one of those things that we grapple with at IHN. And then this was a new question we asked this year. We asked people if they felt looked down upon or disrespected when they went to get food assistance, and half of the respondents said yes. And that's really, really shocking. As I mentioned, a lot of the people doing this work are volunteers with big hearts that care. It's their faith community that is inspired to serve the community. And yet we're not treating them with respect and dignity. And so that's a big thing, a big message that we try to push through our education is, if you want to feed people, you have to make them feel welcome. If they feel like they're being looked down on and mistreated when they come to your food pantry or to your SNAP office, they're not going to get the help they need, and you're defeating the work that you're trying to do. So there's a whole lot of room for improvement there. And then I'll just finish up with our famous pie chart. Kathy has seen this many times over the years. Every year we have a volunteer who contacts all of our charitable partners, and then also all the government agencies in Indiana that administer feeding programs. And we gather information on where the meals come from. I don't know if you all can see the numbers very well, but I'll tell you what it says. So that giant chunk over there, 59% of the meals in Marion County, this is 2022, the latest that we have, 59% of the meals came from SNAP. So, when you hear about the debates about food stamps or SNAP and whether or not, we should be giving people money to buy their own food, if we don't, we're going to have a huge problem on our hands. SNAP is the most successful, most effective way to feed people if they're eligible. So not everybody's eligible that has a need for food, but handing people a card with money to buy food, to buy the things that they need and want, to feed their families in the way that they want to, is the most straightforward, no nonsense, successful way to feed people. As I mentioned, not everybody's eligible, so there are lots of other needs out there. This next light blue chunk is school meals, summer meals, and CACFP, which is like daycare and adult daycare feeding program. Again, federally funded. All the blue slivers are the federal funding, and I'm sorry they're not arranged all together, but WIC, TFAP, which is the USDA commodities that come through Gleaners, and then some other federal programs through SACOA are included in there too. So if you add up all those blue chunks, I think it's 79% of the food in 2022 for food assistance programs came from the federal government. And that's why public policy is so critical. If any of that goes away, Gleaners is a huge chunk, 13% of the food in the meals in our county for people using food assistance are coming from them. They already have a warehouse that's 5 football fields. They cannot expand to meet all of that need. And so everybody plays a role. We need all of the players involved, and we need to make sure that these programs are well supported. And just to show you a little comparison, that number at the top right is 179 million meals, give or take, were provided in the county through all these programs in 2022. In 2020, it was 176 million. So that's just another demonstration of the ever increasing need for help. And you can see that the the players vary from year to year in terms of how many meals they provide, but SNAP is always, always the biggest. And I believe that, the last thing I wanted to say is that Indy Hunger Network is a member of the Alliance to End Hunger, which is a national organization of organizations like us. So we're called a hunger-free community organization. There are more than 50 across the nation. Some are city level, some are state level or regional. But they've all been demonstrated to really help solve the problem by helping our communities and political leaders have a better understanding of the problem, by building capacity in our communities for emergency food programs, and then improving access through programs like our Fresh program, where we're actually sitting down with people and helping them connect to food. So I will end there and invite Fred to join me for questions.
Few minutes for questions, so please line up or enter it in chat if you're online. And while you're thinking real quick, there's 2 other people in the food space in the room today they want to introduce you to, because if you may want to, in addition to talking to Fred and Kate, talk to them as well. Kathy Connor Kiner, sorry, I flipped it. Both have been, she's been referred to by both presenters today. She's the executive director of the Crooked Creek Food Pantry, which serves people on the northwest side of Indianapolis. So thanks for being here, Kathy. And Adam Clevenger, he's on the board of Second Helpings. That's an organization in town that does several things around food, of providing meals, also provides culinary training so people can get jobs, right? So glad to have you here as well.
We have an online question. What is the eligibility to qualify for food pantry help?
Get in line. You know, we don't do needs testing on certain programs like TFAP. The federal government asks us to collect certain information, but it's self-declaring. So if the neighbor says they need the food, we don't do a independent needs test for them.
Yeah, that's really the most important role of food pantries, is that anybody can come for help. So if you're applying for SNAP or WIC or school meals, obviously there are criteria that govern whether or not you're eligible and can get food from those sources. Food pantries were designed to be an emergency food system, and unfortunately in a lot of places they're being used like free grocery stores because that's the only place people can get food. And I don't say that to denigrate the people using them that way. It's just that that's what our system has led to, that we don't have people don't have enough money to buy groceries, so they come back week after week. But they were designed to be sort of that, I lost my job, what do I do for food tomorrow situation? And now they're really meeting a constant need in our community. But they're vital because they serve everybody.
I have a question. So for those of us sitting in the room who may get asked to make donations to food pantries through our kids' schools or here at our workplaces, things like that, if you were going to say, like, here are the items when you have the opportunity or someone asks you to donate food, like it's easy to grab mac and cheese, but as you said, it's not always the most nutritious choice. So if we're trying to improve health here and we want to make good choices to what we donate, what is that?
So I'll start by saying from Gleaners' perspective, we're not in the food drive business anymore. Our superpower is acquiring food on a massive scale. So we can take a dollar that is donated to us and buy almost $10 worth of groceries that you would buy at, the cheapest grocery store. And that sounds a little snotty, like I'm turning my nose up at the food drive part, but that we're just not built for that. So now, having said that, there are great food drives. That's a great part. Again, it's a big tent of people contributing, and people when we do prepare the food that we provide, meal making things are really important. So if you can do pasta and pasta sauce, we do. Some of our folks are illiterate or English isn't their language, so we do videos of what people can prepare in a box. People love peanut butter. They love tuna. Things that are protein based is one of the most popular things that aren't perishable.
Yeah, one of the things that we really encourage food pantries to do is create a list of most wanted items, because as Fred said, if you've seen one food pantry, you've seen one food pantry. And if you're in Speedway, you might be serving a lot of African immigrants. If you're on the east side, there might be a lot of people with a Central American background. So the different foods that people want and need in those areas may vary. And you don't know necessarily if your food pantry, if it's a school donation, you might not know if the food pantry can support fresh foods, but some of them would love to have donations of a bag of apples or a bag of the cuties, the little mandarin oranges. So I would encourage who's ever organizing that to ask the pantry, what do you need? If you don't know, those staples like pasta, rice, they get a lot of canned vegetables. So probably, that's good food, but maybe not the highest need. Toilet paper is something that almost every food pantry likes to have on stock too, because you can't buy that with SNAP benefits. So if you buy toilet paper, even though it's not food, you're still helping that family's budget.
Question. So at Regenstrief, we're trying to connect clinical needs with social needs. And so you've presented a lot of, I think, a lot of information and a lot of ideas where researchers will have interest about, oh, could I do this or whatever, right? So if they were interested in learning more, or potentially maybe asking you to work on a grant with them or something, how do they do that? What happens? Who should they talk to?
I forgot to mention when I talked about our hunger study, we're gearing up for our 2024 hunger study. And this year we're going to be working with the O'Neill School at IU with two professors there who actually have a background in economics. But if you're interested in participating and contributing, we would love to have you join into that team doing that study, trying to understand who's food insecure, what are their issues, what are their challenges, and how can we better serve them. So that's one easy way you can already plug into something we're doing, but we love collaborating. As you heard, I have a PhD. My research is my first passion, and I'm always interested in participating or providing information or resources to people who have a different idea than what we're already doing. And please feel free to email me.
Yeah, same here. Emailing me would be the best. It's fglass@gleaners.org. fglass@gleaners.org, and I'll be eager to talk to anybody that's interested in doing any follow-up conversation.